All right, so this is a video primer for some introduction to Python, programming. So we just get started writing code. So I'll just call this primer. I'm just creating a new Python file. I'll call it primer. So Python is an easy to learn interpreted programming language that was created by Guido van Rossum, and it has like a lot of applications in different areas, from artificial intelligence, data analytics, computer vision, and so on, machine learning, etc. Right? So we're going to just go through the basics of Python programming in this video. It's just going to be a rundown of a lot of things. So at the foundation of computing, everything deals with data, right? You want to collect data, you want to process data, you want to gain useful information from the data. Now, when it comes to data, the smallest piece of data you collect during software programming is stored as a variable. So at this stage, we just leave it as simple as this, a variable, right? So it's a variable. So a variable is just a named location that holds data. So let's say we are building a system that some users are going to use. So we have a user called Alice, and Alice is 9 years old, and Alice is, let's not use 9, let's say 19 years old, and Alice weighs, let's say 50 kg, and she is let's say 165 centimeters in height, right? So now these are all information about Alice, which is an example of a user. And now we need to store this information somewhere so that we can use that now to perform some form of computation on this our user called Alice. So for us to store this information, we need to store it in a variable. We need to store these values in a variable. So a variable is a memory location that holds data. So what piece of information are we storing here? We are storing the name, her age, her weight, and her height in centimeters. So for us to store this information, basically we have to create variables. So to create a variable in Python, what you do is you just say name is equal to Alice, right? Now when it comes to variables have data types, right? Just like your age is a number, your weight is a number, and your height is a number. So let's just make this height more interesting. Let's say 165.7 centimeters, right? So this here now is of a data type called string. It's a string data type. So a string data type is just a collection of characters, and it's normally within quotes. So it can be single quotes or it can be double quotes, right? So whenever you see any piece of information within quotes, you know that that data type is a string. Now for our age, your age is going to be a whole number, which is an int. So this data type now is an integer. So when it comes to your weight as well, we can put the weight to be equal to 50, and this is also an integer. So let me just put it in full integer. But this on its own is not an integer, it's not a whole number, it's a fraction. So we can now have height is equal to 165.7. Now this is a float. So fractions in Python are floats, whole numbers are integers, and we have strings. There are other data types like Boolean and so on. We're just going to focus on these three for now: strings and integer. So now we have this particular user, Alice. We've collected her name, her age, and her weight. So we can do several types of operations on her, right? So let's say instead of age, let's just put year of birth, and let's say she was born in the year 2006. So that will make her 19 years, right? So we may want to use this now to calculate her current age. So if we're going to calculate her current age, we can now say print 2025 minus 2006. Right, so let's run this. So we're getting her age here, right? So this is an example of an operation that you can carry out on variables. So this, since this is a numeric type, now we can carry out arithmetic operations on it. So instead of putting 2006, I can put year of birth here, and I can run this, and it's going to still give us her age at this this year, right? Assuming she's born in January. So this is not exactly accurate, but she's going to be 19 this year. So so this is an example of an operation you can carry out. So you can carry out arithmetic operations on variables. So now let's move further a bit and say, okay, let's say we want to calculate force is equal to mass times acceleration. So we want to perform this calculation. Now, to get the value of force, we have to get these two variables. These are the two variables that determine what the value of force is. So if you have a higher mass or higher acceleration, it's going to lead to higher force, right? So for us to do that, we can now say we have mass is equal to, let's use Alice's mass, let's say 50, and we now have acceleration is equal to, let's say 30. So can now say force is equal to mass times acceleration. Then lastly, we can now print force. So you can see the value of our force, which is 1,500, right? So a variable is just a named memory location that holds data. So in this case, we have the mass, which is the data, and we're storing it in a particular location, and we're naming it mass, right? Because if we don't have this name, we'll not be able to identify it on the computer's memory. So we use this name now to identify and pull this particular value. So that's why when we did mass times acceleration, it's just basically this value times this value, which now give us this 1,500 result. Now, if you look at what we have here in everything that we've done, we've hard coded these values, right? And hard coded means we've written these values inside our code. We've written the name of Alice inside our code. So what happens when someone named Jonathan, for example, comes to use this application? They can't use it, right? So what we can do now is to receive user input. So I'll just change some of this code. So I'm going to have input, and I'll say enter your name. So this input is a helper function that just helps us to receive user input whatever the user types onto the keyboard. So if I run this now, let me add something here. So I can say name is this, right? So I'm adding like a message here. So let's just run this primer. So I can enter, I can say, let's just say Ella, like this. Supposed to pass in the value. So I can say name, comma, is. So I can run this again. I can say Bella. I can see Bella is 19, right? So similarly for the age as well, we can also use the input function. So just type input. So correct this typo. So have input. Now this input method, if you hover over it, you're going to see, or this input function, you're going to see this str here, right? So if you read the documentation, it says read a string from a standard input, the trailing line stripped and so on. But the key thing I want you to note here is this here. It means this is always going to return a string, right? So if somebody enters their age here, so let me just do this and say enter your age. Somebody does this, enter your age, for example. So if we enter this age and we run this, so enter your name, let's say Sam's, well, we're supposed to enter a year of birth, so let me enter 2008. So if you look at this now, you're getting an error, right? And one of the rules of thumb in programming is whenever you see an error, there's no need for you to panic, right? It's just for you to slow down and read the message. So it's now telling you that you have a type error. What does this mean? It just means you have a data type error. Somehow you've tried to perform operations on a data type that is not supported. So it said unsupported operand types for int and string. And where did it happen? It happened on line 9. Where is line 9? That is here. Because you've tried to subtract a non-number, a string, from an integer. So that's why you're having this. So what happens is at this method, when we entered 2008, is what is going to be entered into the computer is 2008 string like this, instead of 2008 like this, the number like this. So that's why we are getting this issue. So it means we have to convert this particular data that is entered here. We have to convert it into an integer. So what we do is let me just cut this. So we just have int, then we can now have this within that. So what will happen is from this string integer, this int method now, so once the user enters 2008, so we'll have the 2008 string, then the int method is now going to convert it into an integer. So if we do this now, we should be able to get, so let me say Theo, and let's try 2008 again. So 2008, Theo is 17 years old. So we can also do the same thing for weight. So we can say input, enter your weight. Then for this, as you guess, instead of int, is going to be float. So I can say input, enter your height. So basically the same thing here. If you whenever the input is entered, if we enter, let's say 16170.4 now, is going to be a string because the input method receives a string. Now this string is now converted into a float, which is now numeric, right? Which is now numeric, and we can now use that for arithmetic operations. So let's come top here now and do something else. So let's say we want to calculate, let's say velocity is equal to distance divided by time. So when it comes to physics operations, right, in most cases, the data type is going to be float, because you need to get down to, you need to have the number to its granular level, all the decimal points count. You have to be very precise. So for us to calculate velocity, we have two variables that we need to calculate velocity, which is distance and time. So we can say distance is equal to float input, let's say enter distance traveled. Then we can have time, say float input enter time taken to cover that distance. So add space, column space. So if you run this now, we're going to get enter distance traveled. So let's say you traveled X kilometers, right? So cancel this operation. So we can now say, we don't need to create a variable to hold velocity. We can just say print velocity is equal to distance divided by time, like this. So you can have this. So this is just basically the mathematical representation again. So we can run this. We can say the time travel. Let's say you traveled 2 kilometers in 60 seconds. So you can see your velocity. So because we are using a float, we can get all the way down to like the granular level of the value. So this is just variables basically in a nutshell, and you can see that we can perform arithmetic operations on them and so on.